Hey card makers, this is Tricia at Club Scrap with the Vintage America Card Kit Assembly Workshop. Thank you so much for joining me. I've got my instructions all printed out, and whether or not you follow along with me, your very own copy, or just using a device, that's great. I've got the card kit from Vintage Americana, plus my 12-inch guillotine trimmer, and of course my trusty accordion pocket file. And again, for those of you who are new here, if you have not yet had a chance to make your accordion pocket file and you are a member, we are here to help you do that. We've got a video tutorial for you to follow, and we also have a starter kit available that contains the papers and all the other materials needed to make that handy little file. We'll use it to keep everything organized for our card sets A, B, and C, and then it also is used when we make our layouts. We make 8 pages at a time, so then we organize the pieces as we trim them. We're going to be making some really fun card structures today, a total of 12 cards, and I'll walk you through the structure of each style. So we have this cool little standing box card, and I really enjoy making these, and plus they mail flat, which is really kind of handy. We'll make 4 of those, and 2 are vertical and 2 are horizontal. Then we'll be making a wiper card. These are so much fun because they mail in an A6 envelope, and then when the recipient pulls outward on the ends of the card, the left and right edges, that little wiper sentiment pops up. Really fun. 4 of those, and then we'll also make 4 really basic A7 cards that are just really pretty and perfect for many different occasions. Let's go ahead and get started by organizing our papers. When I sort my papers before trimming, getting all the paper in the correct order does prevent some errors, like sometimes maybe grabbing 2 of the same color when you only wanted 1 and so on. So I always go to page 2 of my instructions, and then I look at the names of the papers at the top of the diagram and just sort those in the order called for. So I will grab 1 red, and I'm just going to put that on my trimmer base. And then on top of that, I'll add a gold, beautiful color here, and then 1 manila. Now there's going to be an ivory and a manila plain in your kit, so just make sure the manila is the deeper color that has like really cool fiber flecks in it, and it's very heavy duty. So grab 1 manila and then 1 print. Now the print I'm going to put face down because we'll flip the whole stack over in a minute. Now I'm going to be moving on to the 4 colors listed in the second diagram. So we'll grab 1 red, another gold, this time the ivory, so this is the one without the flecks, and then a print face down with that, and then finally a blue plain. Once we trim all of the papers, we'll trim what we call the cut-aparts, and these are designed for my non-stamping friends. Stampers, you'll want to go ahead and trim all of the pieces into individual elements as well, because then all you need to do to stamp is flip everything over, stamp whatever you want on the plain side, and you've got everything you needed to complete your cards as well. So we'll just take the cut apart that has the weather vane, you make the roll a better place that face down, and then the other remaining cut apart face down. Now take the entire stack and flip it right back on over again, and our work has been cut out for us. Okay, well, we have to cut it out. Anyway, cut it out. Now, if you're new to this, you may just want to observe one time through and perhaps cut your papers 1 at a time, whatever works for you. First, as you can tell, I'm kind of holding my paper and I'm studying what it does. So I'm looking for the grain direction of my paper. So if I hold it by an edge and look how flexible it is from this side versus this edge, the paper feels a lot more stiff, and this is more flexible. So I want my paper flexing easily from top to bottom when I place the sheet in the trimmer. How did I know that? Well, there is an arrow on this diagram right here that tells me I want it dipping easily top to bottom. And the same would be true for the gold we're going to place in next. So this is pretty stiff. This is pretty flexible. It's dipping top to bottom, and I will make a series of cuts. For my newbies here also, I'd like you to make sure that you allow the paper just to simply stack up in a pile to the right of the trimmer blade rather than moving the piece you create when you make each cut. All right, so let's trim at 11 1/4 and then stabilize firmly, especially if you're using 2 sheets of paper. And then slide it down to 7. Now we're going to rotate the 7 by 12 and cut horizontally at 11 3/4 and 10. And that might feel really fast to you, and if it does, I apologize. I'm kind of aiming for the middle of our skill level here. We have really experienced card makers, and that will hopefully be you one day. Especially if you're newer to measuring, this might be more challenging at first, but you'll get the hang of it. So we've just made this larger 7 by 10 inch piece. I'm going to set this aside to be scored. Then we have this more narrow piece. This is a 1 3/4 by 7 right now. Let's trim this horizontally at 4. All right, this strip goes in pocket A, and these are technically scraps. So I'm going to put this in pocket D for didn't use quite yet. Now, if you want, you have these 2 really narrow strips. I did use them, so I'm going to put them in pocket C. And then we get to grab the next larger strip. This should be 4 1/4 by 12 right now. And we're going to cut this horizontally at 11. Set aside this larger piece to be scored, and then you have this little guy. This goes in pocket B. And then you have this long, I think it's a 3/4 by 12 inch strip. Now when you're working with a piece this narrow that you need to trim, sometimes I go to the midpoint of my trimmer base because there are inches marked there as well, or there are inches here at the top where you can put the top edge of the paper along the bottom edge of the line right below the inches. And that gives you a much easier way to find those numbers. So we're going to cut this horizontally at 11 and 7. So the 7 inch piece, pocket C, and then these little guys, pocket B. And I'm sorry to say, my friends, I did not find a home for these bad boys. I'm just going to pop that in D for now, but you could just put that in, the circular file as well. Next, I'll take my manila sheet, and you really want to make sure your grain is working with you here. So make sure it's dipping easily top to bottom. And then same for this really fun print. Check grain each direction, dips easily top to bottom. And now we repeat the same trimming process. So that's 11 1/4 and 7. Rotate, cut at 11 3/4 and 10. Now this piece gets set aside to be scored. This 1 3/4 by 7 will cut it horizontally at 4. File this in pocket A, this in D for didn't use yet. And you of course can find homes for those. This little guy, pocket C, and then pick up that long 4 1/4 by 12 inch strip and we'll cut at 11. This larger piece we'll set aside for scoring, and then the smaller strip, pocket B. Lastly, we should have these narrow guys. We're going to cut again, finding your preferred spot, just wherever you can see best. We'll cut at, I think it was 11. Yes, 11 and 7. Pocket C. And then these guys, pocket B with the others, and then 2 more scraps in the D for delete. Okay, so that completes all the trimming for the first diagram. Now we're moving on to step 2, and we're going to trim these 4 pieces the same way, but notice the arrow on the diagram, it is working left to right. So let's be careful here, and we're going to switch directions. So let's find our grain. Yes, dipping left to right, dipping left to right now. So it's a completely different process and new measurements to follow. So we'll start out by cutting at 7 3/4. And then we'll rotate, and 11 3/4, 9, and 4 1/2. All right, you made 4 pieces that are the same size, 1 in each, 2 of each color rather. Put those on another pile to be scored, and then pick up this little guy. We'll cut him horizontally at 5 1/2. This will be scored, so set these narrow rectangles aside, and then there's another smaller piece that's in the D pocket for didn't use. And we do have, I'm sorry to say, my friends, we have a scrap. D, pocket D. It's not really a scrap, it just has untapped potential. All right, now we're going to trim this horizontally at 11 1/2. Now follow carefully, 5 1/4. take the piece that's in the trimmer vase and rotate it 1 turn. Now it's vertical, and we'll cut it 4. Pocket B. This larger piece, pocket C, and then we have a couple of little scraps here. Very inconsequential. We'll set those aside, and now we get to repeat again. So I'm going to take the ivory, make sure it dips left to right, and the print dipping left to right. We'll repeat the same trimming instructions. So I think our first one was 7 3/4. Rotate, 11 3/4. 9, 4 1/2. Now grab the 4 pieces you just made that are the same size, score, then trim the narrower strip horizontally at 5 1/2. That gets scored. Pocket D. Also pocket D. Grab this next larger strip horizontally at 11 1/2 and 5 1/4. Follow then the rotation. So rotate 1 turn so it's vertical and slice at 4. Place this in pocket B. The larger in pocket C, and we have a few scraps for the D pocket. Now, this next piece is blue, and if you look at the diagram, there is no arrow. That is because the grain direction, in this case, really just doesn't matter. None of the papers will be folded. So if you've ever folded a piece of paper against the grain, you know what that fold will look like. It's going to be crumply and nasty looking. So by cooperating with the grain when we fold our paper, it just creates a prettier fold. We'll cut this blue sheet just by itself at 11, and then 8, and 4. Now you can go ahead and stack the 2 pieces you created that are the same size at 4 inches. Trim them at the same time horizontally at 6. All 4 of these blue panels go in pocket C. And then you have another 3x12. We're going to cut this into squares. So we'll cut at 9, 6, and 3. Stack up all those squares and put them in pocket, pocket B. And this, my friends, goes in D. Next, we're going to turn to page 1 of our instructions and study these 2 diagrams. If you get lost, an easy way to find out where something will go is that there is a letter on each individual element we're going to be trimming, and that tells us what pocket or what card that item is used on. So it's very easy to follow along once you get the hang of it. And also on our prints, it's very, very subtle, but there's an extremely lightly printed registration mark here on the edge of this cut apart. You'll find those at every intersecting cut that you need to make. But for now, just follow along with me and I'll give you some numbers to trim at. Just always kind of default to aligning that little registration mark with the outside edge of your blade on the trimmer. So let's find 10 1/2 and then just like double check our alignment with the blade, which is easy to see. Let those pieces accumulate like we did before. And we'll cut again at 9. And then be really careful. We don't continue this direction because if we did, we would cut through these elements here at the bottom. So let's do a rotation so that the word courage is on our right, and we'll cut at 11. And then make yet another rotation so that this piece is sort of back to where we started with. You make the world a better place up here on the left side. And we will cut at 7 and 3 1/2. Now rotate and we'll cut at 5 1/2. Now these 2 red panels go in pocket C, and then we'll cut this blue strip also in half at 5 1/2 and file those in pocket C as well. And now we'll grab the strip that has these 4 little sentiments on them, and let's cut at 8 1/4, 5 1/2, 2 3/4. These 4 sentiments end up on the pop-up wiper cards in set B, and these end up getting cut by hand, so I'm just going to put them all in pocket B without trimming. Now we have a strip here with some sentiments and a scrap. You can see a little hash mark there, so we'll cut at 11 and 7.5 and 3 3/4. And stack up these 3 pieces and put them in pocket A. Now we have another strip with 3 sentiments. We'll cut at 8 and 4. All 3 of these go in pocket C. And my friends, this is your scrap. Okay, now we have one more piece to trim, and what I always do is study the artwork placement to make sure I don't cut through anything. And then I find the narrowest strips. I put those on the right side so I can trim those off first. That's what I did last time as well. Our measurement here is around 11.5, but not quite. So I always just default to what you're seeing on the registration mark. And then this should cut at around 10 3/4. Those just end up sort of becoming bonus scraps you can use on the inside or outside of your cards. And then I'll cut at 7.5 and 3 3/4. Now we'll rotate. There is going to be a small scrap here, so I'll cut at 11.5, 10, and 5. Stack up these 2 larger rectangles and place them in pocket B. And then we have a little happy birthday here going into pocket A. Oh, look, it's a scrap. All right, now we'll trim horizontally again with sincere sympathy should be on the right, and we'll cut at 10 and 5 again. Pocket B, and the little guy, pocket C. Now we have a series of sentiments plus the word amazing. Just don't worry about the scrap there. We'll take care of it later. So we're going to cut at 10, 7.5, 5, 2.5. Gather up the 4 little rectangles, pocket A, and then this bad boy, pocket B. Here we have some bonus elements. You can just like stick those in D if you want. And that concludes all of the trimming required for all of the cards we're going to be making, the full dozen cards. So, way to go. I'm going to set aside my trimmer and grab my score pal. We need to score all of these papers to prepare them for our cards. And there's a lot of efficiency in doing our scoring all at once. So if you're doing it like what I did, I just go back to my instructions then and look at the dotted lines to indicate which pieces get scored and where. The where is written in your instructions. So I'm just going to grab these largest 7x10 cards. These are nice and easy. And I tend to score 2 sheets at the same time. And it's because I feel confident in the pressure required and in the tool I'm using. So if you do feel comfortable, you can score 2 pieces at a time. This is being placed horizontally, and I'm going to score at 5. So this is the 7x10. And you can, if you want, make 2 passes. And this will go in pocket C, and I can tell my accordion pocket file just isn't happy here. So I'm going to lay that to its side. And then I'll score this other pair of 7x10s horizontally at 5. And again, I might just make 2 passes, especially for that heavier manila paper. Next, we have these 4 1/4 by 11s. I'll take 2 of those, and we're going to make several, quite a few scores. And so I'll just call out those numbers. 5.5, 7, 9, 10.5. And I got a nice score line going through both layers. Then I'll grab the other 4 1/4 by 11s and score again. 5.5, 7, 9, 10.5. Okay, so I have these all scored. I'll put these in pocket A. Now look for these smaller pieces. They measure 2 3/4 by 5.5, and we'll put them 2 at a time in the score pal. We're looking for 2 scores here, 3.5 and 5. And these go in set A. Repeat for the other pair that you should have. 3.5 and 5. Pocket A. All right, we're getting there. Now we have these other pairs. So I will take 2 pieces, and this has a little bit of an extra step, but it's really worth it to take this step because it helps us be more successful at the end. So we'll score horizontally at 5 3/4, and then we're going to flip this pair of panels bottom to top, just like that, and score again at 6.5. So we have 2 score lines. One bump is on one side and one bump is on the other. Let's repeat that for the next pair. So those numbers again were 5 3/4, flip, 6.5. Now we'll do it with the gold and the red. 5 3/4, 6.5. And we save a lot of time by doing 2 cards at once. 5 3/4, 6.5. Beautiful. All of these panels go in pocket B, and that concludes the scoring. Now I've removed every single piece of paper from my accordion pocket file in pocket A. I always just make sure there's nothing in there except maybe some dust. I definitely have dust in that pocket. And then I'm turning to page 3 of my instructions, where I see the visual example of each of the 4 cards this makes. And what we'll notice is that the color schematic of every card is different. And that's where I do what I call the deal. So I'm going to deal out, according to what I see, I'm going to deal out what I have. So I can tell that the first card has a large red card base. So I'll just put that over here. Maybe we'll go horizontal on this deal here. So red, and then gold, and then pattern, and ivory. So that's what I'm seeing in my instructions. Those are the panels I can tell are the bases. Next, I'm going to distribute those little pieces that nest onto the card base. So I'm going to go with gold. And basically we're just interchanging colors. You can do it any way you want. You don't have to follow my examples by any means. Then we have this print. Then we're going to have a white. Then we're going to have a red, or an ivory rather. Okay, and then each sentiment is matted with something, so I can tell that this is the pattern. This one is matted with manila, that fibrous one. This has red, and this one has the gold. And now all we have left are the card sentiments. So I can also consult my instructions. What's the best that could happen? Friends are the family we choose. Wishing you all you're wishing for in red, and then in blue. And then we have our sentiments. So to our horizontal, we'll do a happy birthday, have a great year. Just a plain old happy birthday. Another happy birthday, that's vertical, and the same here. So now we have all of our cards distributed, all of our pieces, and all of the cards are assembled in the exact same way. So that's the beauty of it. So I'm just going to show you the first card in the set, and all the rest you can do by following the same exact instructions. Now this card base has some scores on it, and if you study this, there's an indentation on one side and the bumps on the other, and the bump of the score always goes on the inside of the fold. So I'm going to fold on all of these score lines, making sure I'm burying that bump. Don't do it the inside out way. Do it the right side out way. This last one is centered. I'm just going to make sure. Like I always say, never trust a score line. Always align before you make the crease. So now I have all of these creases in my card base. And you know what I always liken this to is when you buy like a chapstick. It has a little hook and it hangs on here, and the chapstick is here, and then there's your marketing. So it's kind of like making one of those. We're looking to form this rectangular shape here by bending this lower portion of the card. So there's also a smaller piece. Let's go ahead and crease by burying the bump on those two. So this ends up sort of sitting on top of here, and then these two pieces attach to the back of the card base. Clever, right? Now there's a very easy way to line this up, and to adhere these, I like to use my bookbinding glue. I always keep my needle tip applicator facing down so the glue is already at the tip, and then when not in use, just make sure that you have this sealed, because otherwise the glue will dry in the needle tip. So if you study this a little bit, I'm going to place the card kind of in the position I want it, and then just sort of lay it flat here. This is where I want that flap to be adhered to when it's flat. So I will apply glue just to that 1/2-inch tab area. And I'm going to close the card so that that tab sits exactly where we had it when we did our little test. And just take a second and burnish the glue so that it dries. Should we see if it worked? Look at that. There's a really nice box to make our standing box card. It's right where we needed it to be, and it always works best if you do it while it's flat. Same is true for this other piece. Let's test where this is going to live. So this bottom section will line up with the bottom of the box when it's open. And then this tab will be glued to the back of the card base like this. So if I flatten it, I know I need to glue here and then my little tab. So if I study the back of this, I'll tell you where you need to add your glue. Simply add it to the tab and add it to this other bottom single layer, just like that. Now I'm going to align the bottom of this with this crease, and I'm going to center it. Now, does it have to be centered? No, you can put it wherever you want. I just kind of like it centered, and I'm going to put this other little flap behind that, so the tab is glued to the back of the card. Burnish a second, and then it's exactly where I want it to be. Check it out. Now we can just have a few more pieces to attach. 3 more plus some ribbon. So this is designed to nest perfectly. I'll add some of my adhesive. I use an ATG gun. It tends to just go so quickly. I'm going to nest that and then add a little more. And this will be placed right here on the top, and that should fit perfectly. I mean, if all your cutting went well, that is. And here we have what's the best that could happen. I'm going to nest that in the center of the front of that gold panel. To finish it off, in your kit there should be some really sweet little jute ribbon, and all I did was shove it kind of through and behind this layer, and again just kind of catch it from the other side. Maybe that's easier said than done. Okay, so now I have one loop plus I have a tail, so then adjust that size as you want. And you can go ahead and tie the ends in a bow and then trim the tails to whatever size you like. Now, with that finally attached, you also have a sheet of these really cool star dazzles in your kit. And at this point, it's kind of open season. You can select any kind of a star from the sheet and add it to your card. Now, one of my favorite ways to do that is just to take the tip of a craft knife and slide it under one of the stars. And now I have it on my knife, and then I can decide, all right, I'm going to add one like to this little doohickey here. And then I'm going to add another matching one on the other side. And maybe one more kind of on the bottom, just to give it a little oomph. That's a technical term. Okay, so what's the best that could happen? Happy birthday, have a great year. I like that. The other cards in the set are assembled, as I mentioned, the same exact way. So here's the one we did together, and then here's the other one. It's the same exact vertical assembly like what we did before. Same type of thing. Now the other two are assembled the same way, so you just follow the same exact steps, except instead of tying ribbon around here, I stapled a piece of folded white saddle stitched ribbon to the top of this piece. Added my cute little larger star to the nested sentiment on the right. Now this one too, you could bring this down a little further, bring it up a little further, however you want. I just attached my front panel in the center each time. Look at that, so fun and easy. Now let's move on to set B. I've taken everything out of the B pocket and sorted it by size. That seems to always just make it the easiest to sort all of the goods in that one pocket. Plus I have those little tag-shaped pieces, so I've got those set aside. And now I'm going to begin the deal again. You'll want to turn to page 5 of your instructions for your color cues. And it looks like my first card is gold. So what you'll need to do is take both of the gold panels that you've scored and place them in one pile. And then we have an ivory card base, followed by a print card base, and then white. So those are the 4 bases of the cards. Now each one of these will get a nesting panel. So this gets the print. Here we have the red. Next is the white, and then a gold. Now let's do the sentiment. For all you are, for all you do. So nice. Great for our essential healthcare workers right now. Kind heart. All of these. Just so good for the time frame that we're working in here. How about these 3 by 3 inch squares? Each card gets one of those, and each one gets a sentiment. So thank you in blue and red, and then thinking of you in blue, I'm sorry, in red and blue. Now at this point we have these other pieces, which If you look at my finished examples when I was initially making these card samples, I also incorporated some of this. So I had the blue in the D pocket and these other decorative strips. I think I used the star strips. But I also figured that I could get some of these colors just kind of right out of the scraps that I had you trim. So you can interchange these in any way you like. Maybe this one will grab a piece of the blue and trim that out to, well, let's just take a look here. This is 1 by 4 1/4. So trim this horizontally at 4 1/4. And I'll try to remember to add that modification to the instructions. But now I have like a nesting option for each card. And then we also have these sentiments in the tag flag shape here. So amazing goes here and here. Courage goes with these also. And then the star pieces are optional as well. You could replace the strips with the stars. All right. That said, I'm going to stack up the remaining pieces and we'll make the first card together. All the rest get assembled in the exact same way. So we should begin with the card base and we have our score lines once again. So you can see here we have a bump and then we have an indentation. So I'm going to bury the bump by putting that on the inside of the fold. And now here that reveals another bump, so I'm going to bury that. That just created a pleat. I would call that a pleat. Let's repeat that for the other one. So bury this bump and then bury the other bump by folding back, and that's another pleat. So I'm going to set one of these bases aside and then take the other one and place it horizontally in front of you so that the pleat is on the right, and the first fold of the pleat is what I would call a valley, and the second fold is a mounting fold. So you get one pleat, valley, mountain, horizontal. This is on the right. That just gets our orientation all consistent, which I like. Now I'm going to take a grid ruler, and we have these at Club Scrap in 3 different sizes, an 8x8, a 2x8, and a 3x14. But each of them has this little crisscross with a 45-degree angle on it. You don't have to have this ruler for this step, but it really is helpful. I'm going to maybe use a tip of maybe I'll use a pen. So here's the angled line, and here is a square. Now do you see the triangle formed right here? I'm going to place the tip of my paper along that angle with the corner right at the intersecting point. That would be the 1/2 inch intersecting point. Just see if you can recreate that by placing the edge of the paper along the angled line and the tip of the corner in that corner that's naturally formed. So I'm going to do that with my paper on my work surface now. And then I'm just going to bend the paper up to make a really nice 45-degree angle. It's a perfect 45-degree angle. Now, yes, you could absolutely just tip the paper over, fold a corner in. That's fine. But this just gives me a nice straight angle for the functionality of my wiper card. Next, I'm going to place the triangle that I just created into what will be this valley fold on my horizontal card base. And if you want, you can do it about a quarter of an inch, which is 2 blocks on the grid ruler, a quarter of an inch from the top edge. And it's going to be right there. And here's my triangle. Next, take your bookbinding glue. And I really do like this product for the job. And I'm just going to put glue only on the triangle right there. That's it. Then carefully take the pleat and push it down onto that triangle. And just give it a second. I can see a little excess glue here. I probably added a little too much, but it's okay. I just need to give this a second so that it cures, and I can kind of open it up and check to make sure I don't have any stray glue where I don't want it. And I can put that back down again. You can sort of see how this functions. Now, once this has been installed, I'm going to take the other mate and I'm going to flip it so that this pleat is on my left, and it will go valley mountain. So that's how this gets attached. Kind of makes a little sandwich with the 3x3 blue square in the middle. So the first area I will apply glue is going to be on this flap. I do like to use the wet glue because it gives me a little more time to adjust. And then just make sure you line up the non-scored edge of the mate of the sandwich with the pleat on the right. And then I can flip it and then do the same thing here. I can put my glue on this flap and then finish the assembly by lining up those edges and then finishing my sandwich basically. The way I kind of like my wiper to work is for the wiper to come up on the upper right edge. And that's why we didn't decorate anything until after this point, because what happens if you like decorate and you open it up and it goes down from the bottom or the wrong side and everything's inside out and backwards. So by doing the decorating after we do the assembly, it's just better. Now I only went down a 1/2 inch. I was sort of debating, maybe, a 1/4 inch I went from the top edge. Maybe a little bit more would be better. It would hide it more thoroughly. It's up to you. Designer's choice. Okay, so to finish the card, this is nice and easy. We're going to take our sentiment and we can go ahead and nest that on the matching panel. So it should fit there perfectly if your cutting went well. And then I'll nest this and go ahead and attach that to the card base. Now in my sample I have a blue scrap and I've got a star strip. It doesn't really matter. I just, we had the paper and I decided to use it. So you can use your little scraps in this little valley fold if you wish, or skip it all together. It's entirely up to you. It's probably enough scrap to get both sides. So this nests right in there, adds a little flare to the left edge. And then thank you will be attached to the blue square. Now this is a rectangular element, but I just designed it in a square because of the hidden portion of the wiper. Next, I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut the innermost area of the word amazing from this scrap. There is an outer area as well, but if you want this to nest perfectly onto the craft tag we've included in the kit, you'll need to cut on the innermost line. So it gives you a couple of different assembly options here. And that fits right in there. So lovely. I'm going to nest this with some of our bookbinding glue. Just easy peasy. Not every job requires the same type or amount of glue, that's for sure. And then I'll just take a snip of this jute, fold it in half, shove the loop through the tag, and then shove the tails through the loop. Shoving, that's what we're going to do. We're doing a lot of that today. And then you can trim. Now this, I kind of attached it to the card, left corner of the card base so that the tag sort of extends a little bit past the mountain fold there on the left. You can put it anywhere you like, but the reason I did it this way is because the wiper is coming out from the upper right, and then this adds a little balance to the card base by placing it in the lower left. So when the card is open, I think it's really well balanced, and that's pretty much how the recipient would probably put it on their desktop, sitting like that, so you got a really nice looking card here. Plus all of it will fit easily in an envelope and mail with no problem. Now to finish things off, you could also take your craft knife and maybe choose a nice looking star to add to the banner, just to give it a little bit of sparkle. Maybe I'll add a smaller star to this one, and then maybe one more on this blue guy. Craft knife just works really well for removing the stars. And honestly, I think they look okay on the backing with the sheet, but they look fabulous when you add them to your projects. The remaining cards in set B are assembled exactly the same way. And again, it's sort of designer's choice how you want to handle this edge here, but I love how this turned out. Very, very fun. Let's move on to set C. Before we do that, I guess I've never really showed you the remaining samples. And again, you can see that they're all very similar. Oh, and as a reminder, there were 2 other things I forgot to have you do. Number 1 was to take some of this really pretty gold satin ribbon, simply cut, maybe like a 2.5, 3-inch piece, fold it in half, and then tape this between the cut apart and the blue square. I usually taped it to the cut apart. And that gives you just a little something, a little indication that something fun is happening. And again, it continues to add balance, a little bit of height to the card. So that's a sweet detail, and also added some stars to the thank you. I'm so glad I remembered to add in these finished cards as well. This one, I just ran some gold ribbon across the bottom. Still added the ribbon here top as well. And then the final thinking of you here. After emptying the contents of Pocket C, wow, I had a lot of little pieces. So again, that organization initially of just getting your pieces sorted out by size is really beneficial. And I do like to deal it from my hand, so I've got the larger pieces already in my hand. And I've turned to page 6 of my instructions, where you're going to be able to see the sample of every card. So I can tell I've got a red card base first, and then a manila. These are a little larger, so I'll kind of overlap them so you can see. Then how about a gold, and then a print. So those are the 4 card bases. Now we have some nesting panels. These are the largest. So I have an ivory with the red, a red with the manila, a print with the gold, and then a gold with the print. Each one gets its very own blue panel that should fit right on top of the previous one. And again, that's where I do all that math for you, so that when you trim it according to the instructions, everything fits and as a little waste as possible. Now we have our weather vane. You make the world a better place. So happy for you. And then may you have courage to face tomorrow and the love that surrounds you today. Always in need of some nice sympathy cards. And now each one will get a little wider strip. So this looks like this is going to be the gold, the wide gold, the wide print, then the manila, and the red. Now we have a skinny strip. So the print, the gold, the red, and the manila. Now when you do it this way, every single card has a representative of each color. And then we have 4 more components to nest on the inside of the cards. And if you're wondering where to find out what goes on the inside of this, in the instructions it'll say inside, celebrating you today. Then we have a time to celebrate, and then 2 sympathy insides. Now I'm going to set aside, as usual, the final 3 cards, and we'll make this first card together. The basic assembly is the same, and then we find the bump of the score, and that's what gets buried inside the fold. I notice so many people do it the opposite way, but the correct way is to put the bump on the inside. That gives you the cleanest, neatest fold on the outside, and it's because also we are folding with the grain of the paper, because I thought about that way ahead of time. And now I'm going to go ahead and nest the blue panel onto the ivory. I assembled this card just a little bit differently than the others, and I'm glad this is the example, because it's kind of fun how I did it. And this will then be attached to the card base first, and I'm going to do it a little far to the right of center, but centered from top to bottom. So here I have my grid ruler, and here's my 0 center. And from top to bottom, the center is going to read 3.5 on my ruler, and I'm just going to go like 1/8 of an inch, which is 1 cube on my ruler from the edge. So the ruler is placed again centered top to bottom, 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and then when I add this panel, centered top to bottom puts me at 3 1/8. So now this is exactly centered top to bottom, and it's exactly level on the right, which is so nice to do when you have the help of this ruler. Now I'm going to add my larger gold strip, and let's add him. I'm just going to check, because I have my original sample here. I really like the way this came out, so I'm just going to measure. What is the distance? 3/4 of an inch. All right, so this is easy. Take your adhesive and run it along the gold strip so it's ready to go. And now I'm going to find 3/4 of an inch from the edge of the card using my grid ruler. So the ruler is placed vertically. I have a lot of people doing this, but if you just place the ruler vertically, 3/4 of an inch is going to be the 3rd solid line on the ruler. Boom. So now it's level. And then I'm going to place my strip against the ruler's edge and then drop it down. And now I know it's level top to bottom. Hopefully you hung in there with me on that. Next, I'm going to add a little bit of bookbinding glue along the right. I have to fill this with glue, obviously, along the right edge of this strip, right onto the card base. Now I have this printed piece. So what I usually do is just have it land on the wide strip and drag it down until the piece falls right into place. I heard it click. It actually clicks into place. And now I have a nice level and very decorative strip. Now I want this piece to be resting on the gold and also a little bit off the left edge. So I'm going to put some adhesive on here. Switch the ruler's position. I'm going to go about 1/2 inch from the edge here, centered at 3.5, and then find the measurement for the panel. It looks like 2 3/4. Now I'm centered top to bottom, and I'm centered, I'm level vertically. See how that came into, oh, I just love it. And the other cards in the examples are centered completely. And of course you can use the ruler to help you do that too, but this one I just did it a little off, and I like it. I like the feel of it, so you could absolutely recreate that same feel with the remaining cards. On this particular one, when I added the ribbon, all I did was trim a length of the saddle stitched ribbon. I like to kind of figure out which way the ribbon wants to go, and it definitely wants to go this way, and I'm just going to tie a knot into the center ish and pull it nice and tight so that it's a flat bow. I hate mailing cards that I wonder, is it actually going to get there, or is it going to be, do they have to pay postage when it arrives? Or so for the most part, try to keep it flat, or you have to add the extra postage. And I'm going to add this ribbon right here into the gold area. You could also use a glue line. I think that's what I used initially, but the bookbinding glue, if given just the time to set, will adhere ribbon to your pages and your cards, because we're making cards right now. Finally, you'll add the Celebrating You Today to the inside of the card. And another option would be, I think we had those long strips with the stars and the dots. You could also add those to the insides of your cards as well. To finish that off, it would be a really nice finishing touch there. In fact, now the glue's dry enough, I will go ahead and add that. And let's take a look at the remaining cards in the set. So I'll set this aside. Here's the other vertical, and you can see I didn't offset things. I stapled the piece of folded ribbon to this component before attaching it, and then I added 4 of the tiniest size stars to the corners of the card. Such a nice finishing touch there. They look like brads kind of, but again, very low profile, lightweight, perfect for mailing. That's why I love Tassels for my cards, especially these star shapes. And they have like other jewel Tassels, they're called. They're really nice round shapes that look kind of like brads. So this one, I wrapped the ribbon around the panel, attached the panel, then I made a pretty bow and attached the bow to the ribbon with some glue lines. So that worked really, really well for this lovely sympathy card. Same with this one. I stretched the gold ribbon across and also created a 3-part bow, which I then added to the ribbon. Looks so, so sweet. I would be really, my heart would be warm to receive this card from someone I love. The sentiment on the front. Well, I guess that wraps up our card making session. I hope you had a good time. I hope you learned things along the way. And especially if you're new, I hope you just pause liberally and take your time with this process, enjoy it. And over time, you will just become more and more skilled, more and more efficient. And we'll just look forward to our time together every month. I'll see you next time.